this is also revealed in Aldous Huxley's book, Brave New World, where he's going into this totally controlled society. These are direct takeoffs from Plato's work. Now, Plato probably didn't even originate these ideas himself. They probably came all the way back from ancient India and China, from the Brahma class, where the class system still exists today. And these are concepts that are thousands of years old.
Coming into the 20th century, the ideas and machinations of the espoused New World Order, this idea of getting the whole planet under the control of one person, came in a political and a religious form. In the political form, you have this thing called Fabian socialism. And in the religious form, you had this thing called theosophy, which is the mixture of God and these different religions, with sophism, which is found in Plato's Republic. This is the use of effective rhetoric and persuasive speech for misdirective or misleading purposes. So you mix the theosophy and the Fabian socialism, and you have the ingredients of the New World Order. You have the ingredients of the operating system of the New World Order, both religious and political. Now, people who were members of both these groups, theosophy and Fabian socialists, include William T. Stead, H.G. Wells, right? So you have people who have written books about the New World Order or have been an executor to the will of someone who said, I want to create a secret society to achieve this New World Order, being Cecil Rhodes. So the idea is that you have this theosophy, which uses, for instance, a symbol of the swastika, which was also used by Rudyard Kipling pre-20th century on the spine of his books. So this was an Indian sun symbol that was found by a British journalist, Rudyard Kipling, who was also a Freemason while he was in India. This then later becomes the symbol of the Nazi Party, and it's an interesting trek of the swastika in between. However, at this point in the early 20th century, you've got people participating in the consequence of Cecil Rhodes' last will and testament, that being the Round Table work groups, which were then spun off into the Royal Institute for International Affairs, the Council on Foreign Relations, which is the North American extension of Cecil Rhodes' legacy. At the same time, they created groups like Tavistock in order to control people's public opinion about the upcoming war with Germany, and after the war, managing what people were to think of the situation created by the Versailles Treaty.
Understanding the symbol for Fabians as being the wolf in sheep's clothing, it becomes easy to draw the connection between a supposed gradual implementation of socialist ideology and the implementation of state-dominated control via tiptoe totalitarianism. Both a left and right foot marching towards the New World Order of elitist corporate state dominance of our daily affairs.
The interesting thing about these Fabian socialists, and this is easy enough to Google, the Fabian socialist emblem, their avatar, if you will, was a wolf in sheep's clothing. And there's actually pictures of stained glass windows where the Fabian socialists are standing on either side and they're pounding the world with these big hammers. And they're talking about shaping it into the image that they're picturing for the world. And when you have an emblem that is a wolf in sheep's clothing, that's very telling. But if you do another Google search and search out who is Fabius, where does Fabian socialism come from, you learn that Fabius became a Roman dictator because Hannibal was threatening Rome, and the Roman people panicked. And he said, I can stop Hannibal. And he did. He did this through a war of attrition, which was a long, prolonged, drawn-out war where you're denying the other side the resources that needs to exist. This then became the philosophy of the Fabian socialists, who then domineered the 20th century in their image.
In the media, you'll see people of the left or of the center, as they're called. Again, you know, there's your point, there's your belief system. You're in the left, you're in the center, or you're on the right. They go on about Fox News and Bill O'Reilly and all these other people as being kind of crazy right-wing, pro-Bush or Republicans, right? Well, yeah, but then you watch MSNBC, you look at Oberman and that lady who's on after him, Maddow, Rachel Maddow, yeah? And they are, for the Democrats, the same as Fox News is for the Republicans. And what they're doing, 90% of them at least have no idea they're doing this. They're just placed in there to do a job, and they think they're doing the right job. They're polarizing belief. It's the same principle. It's not what you believe as long as you do believe.
I think fear, force, and coercion, as well as certain varieties of mysticism, are absolutely essential to most power structures. You don't need any kind of compulsion to get people to believe in things that are unquestionable. There's no compulsion required to get people to believe in gravity. The more force, the more fear, the more coercion that has to go into backing up some kind of belief system, I think that exposes the degree to which it is entirely false.
And it's fear of the SWAT squad, it's fear of what's going to happen if I can't pay my mortgage, fear of what the teacher said, fear of what the boss says, better keep the boss happy, and all this stuff. All these points of fear which allow the tiny few that are actually knowingly doing this manipulation to keep in line and control the direction and perception of billions of people through fear.
As the problem of the few controlling the many in a malevolent, irresponsible fashion becomes more and more apparent to the masses, even some considered elites themselves have started to reveal the scenes behind the curtain, starting by asking some serious questions and making films for public consumption. Johnson & Johnson heir Jamie Johnson has become a documentary filmmaker, directing two interesting films, Born Rich and The 1%, which both explore the lifestyle of wealth from a critical angle and focus upon the growing wealth gap between the haves and the have-nots, and what attitudes are prevalent, through some very revealing interviews with several movers and shakers from extremely wealthy families.
Hey, Mr. Pants. Come on in, Mr. Pants. Pants. It's hard to say why that particular bullet was shot, but it's a neighborhood where a lot of things are changing, where a lot of people are upset, where people have been pushed out of their homes by real estate value, not being able to pay the taxes, whatever else. I've tried to think about it. I've tried to think about if I were out there and someone else were in here, what would cause me to be resentful or envious.
The south side of Chicago is one of the poorest inner city communities in America. But now rich people are moving in and creating some serious changes in the neighborhood.
What used to be housing projects are suddenly condos, and you wonder what impact you're having on the city and who lives here, who can afford to live here. Three big tools have been used in a lot of areas. First, you build a big police station. Secondly, you tear out all the basketball courts. And lastly, if there's a local public school that poor people attend, you tear down the school.
This land is worth more than what the niggas over here can give them. So what can you do with them? Displace them, and the ones that you don't want over here, you get rid of them. You get rid of them. And what you use as an excuse, use the drug dealers, use the cocaine house. This is my son. Come here. This is my son.
Do you feel like your kids have an opportunity to get rich in this country?
Hell no. Hell no. They ain't no rappers. My kids ain't gonna be rappers. They ain't gonna be rich.
It's easier to just cleanse the earth of these people, send them to the far reaches of the universe, and The mayor's office will build a big police station, build a bunch of townhouses, the yuppies will buy in and bourgeoify it, and suddenly we'll have a community. Yeah, there'll be a bunch of people displaced. Yeah, there'll be a bunch of crime problems, but it's easier. We found the easy solution.
Another film, The American Ruling Class, from director John Kirby, was written by Council on Foreign Relations member Louis Lapham, who's also editor of Harper's Bazaar and Lapham's Quarterly. Lapham seems happy to use his connections to reveal the inner workings of the power elite, as if he's finally resolving his conscience.
So, as chairman and publisher, how do you balance all of these competing interests? You've got the family, the trust, the newsroom, the audience, the advertisers.
Stock market.
The stock.
Thank you. We worry a little bit about our earnings and our stock price. Once every quarter, the executive editor, in this case Bill Keller, gets into the ring, and the CEO, Russ Lewis at the moment, but soon Janet Roberts get in the ring, and they duel it out. They just have a fist fight. And whoever wins for the next quarter, we worry more about the journalism or we worry more about the profits. It's a very simple operation.
Oh, there's a shot under the heart.
It's a balancing act. It's easy. Anyone can manage for one, anyone can manage for the other. You can manage for nothing but the quality of the journalism. You can manage for nothing but the quality of the profits. And that's easy. The challenge is to manage for both.
Andrew Carnegie was one of the richest men in the 20th century. He believed that capitalists are trustees of public wealth, and that wealth, therefore, has to be reinvested in society.
Don't taxes do that?
And no, the entire thing he gave.
My concern, though, is that the capital that allows for the formation of these philanthropic institutions comes from the fortunes of extremely wealthy Americans. And in a lot of cases, they've accumulated this through questionable, I mean, not necessarily questionable, but...
questionable.
Well, maybe questionable. Okay, a questionable means.
As my friend Mrs. Astor said, wealth is accumulated manure. If it's collected, it stinks. So you have to spread it around. And there's nothing wrong with philanthropy spreading it around.
Our country has been enjoying several decades of unprecedented growth, but at the same time, poverty hasn't improved as much, and the gap between rich and poor is increasing.
I think you can be too negative. We obviously have concerns in our society about inequality, but if you look at the fraction of American families without televisions, or the fraction without telephones, or the fraction where 4 children are confined to a single bedroom, or the fraction of people who are measured as eating inadequately, you look at any of those kinds of measures, you've actually seen fairly substantial trend improvements in the United States.
There's been great improvements in the country today. Pull out your American Express card. The guy who's the chief executive happens to be Ken Chenault. If you invest in Merrill Lynch, the head of Merrill Lynch is a black person. I would say today that the U.S. Army is probably the most integrated part in the government or in the country. There still has to be a lot of change. I don't want you to give you an impression I think that the battle's over.
The last thing I'd mention is a film called The American Ruling Class, which is put together by Louis Lapham and a couple other elite personalities. And what he does is goes through and asks the question, is there a ruling class? Is there an American ruling class, a group of people who are not elected who actually run this country? And he showed tons of examples throughout, going to Council on Foreign Relations members, Skull and Bones members, Rhodes Scholars, Trilateral Commission members, people who go to Bohemian Grove. Here they all are. Here's what they do. Here's their resumes. Yes, they're in control, and they're not ashamed to tell you about it, which means they think you can't do anything about it. And the only thing we need to do to get out of this problem is read books and communicate to each other and learn to think critically through those processes. That's it. And in doing that, that is the whole solution to this problem that they've created. And they're depending on us not to do our reading, not to do our homework. And that's what Alan Dulles said. That's how they got away with the Kennedy assassination. Americans don't read. The American public doesn't read.